By brief order of introduction, my name is Aidan Corcoran. I'm architect and designer at Verisec. Verisec is a global company headquartered in Stockholm with offices in the Middle East, Melbourne, Milan, and Mexico. Our core business focus is cryptography and authentication. And relevant to this particular presentation is our payment cryptography as a service, 10x Pay. And I'm already troubling with the clicker. I went looking for the oldest photograph I could find of myself working in payments because I couldn't find a nice corporate picture. So this is me in 1992 persuading that Verifone Trans 420 to talk to an array called PinPad. And that's connected in the back end to base 24 running APAX 40. And I suppose that's a very long way of suggesting that I have more than 30 years development experience in payments, working with applications and cryptography. So yes, I think move on. Yes. So of course, we all know, sorry, one thing to mention. I'm going to have some simple examples because it's quite a technical context and we're going to be getting into the weeds a little bit. You could consider this presentation as a shopping list of ideas and concepts if you were considering moving away from physical HSMs. I'm going to use some PCI terminology because there's plenty of it already, and I may introduce some new terms in this evolving space. So of course, we all know what a HSM is. It's a hardware device performing cryptographic functions used by almost everybody in payments, issuers, acquirers, processors, and even some merchants. Back when I started in payments, these hardware devices were co-located with the mainframes processing the transactions. They were even in the mainframes in some cases. And then, say around 20 years ago, they moved from the basements to an outsourced data center. And that's really the classic on-premises deployment, where the bank or processor owns the hardware and it's in a data center, and they have all the responsibilities to look after it. These days, we're seeing a bit of a move towards the cloud, primarily with the host applications, and of course, we have to mention the cloud-native applications as well. But that also then drives a requirement for cryptography. And what we're seeing in the market now is two main approaches to resolving that requirement. One I'm going to call bare metal, and that's coming my term. That's where a service provider rents or leases HSMs to a customer, and the customer is then responsible for a lot of the configuration and elements of that particular solution. And then you also have cryptography as a service. Basically, the service provider offers an API to the customer, which provides the cryptographic functions. The role of the service provider is very important in that case, that they are responsible for the day-to-day operation of the HSMs while providing the services of those HSMs to their customers. It's really interesting, the commercial basis. Typically, if you're having physical HSMs, there's a lot of capital expenditure. But with cloud HSMs, in both versions, you have ongoing costs. Typically, though, bare metal is offered on a per device or maximum capacity basis, whereas cryptography as a service is offered on a per API call. And they both have their benefits. I'm going to have some diagrams now, and again, as I say, they've been simplified a bit for time because of the time constraints. And of course, many of you will recognize this as a classic HSM connectivity. Host application and a small pool of HSMs right beside it. And this will be the basis for our diagrams going forward. Of course, if you have a second application, you might have a different group of HSMs. And this is all pretty standard. This is a version of bare metal, where you have a host application connecting through a secure channel through to a load balancer and the HSMs from the service provider. In this case, the host application could be on premises in your own data center, or it could be a cloud-based application. The application is unaware of the location of the HSMs. It's just a long connectivity link. And because of the PCI requirements, it's a secure channel. And if you have a second customer through to the service provider, they may well be connected to a second group of HSMs, a completely independent infrastructure. If we look at cryptography as a service, that's a little bit different. On the left-hand side, we have the same host application connected through a secure channel. This could also be in the cloud or on premises. But instead, it's connected to a virtualization system. Now, I may have used the word abstraction layer earlier. A virtualization system is a PCI term to describe the landing point for connectivity from a host application into a cloud HSM. It allows the application to be intermediated between the HSMs or the HSM processing elements. And again, that's another term that you may be unaware of. HSM processing elements refers to a pool of devices performing the cryptographic functions in a cloud HSM space. Naturally, if you have a second customer, they can come in through and through the virtualization layer, access the cryptographic processing on the back end. I thought I might be interested to give you a bonus example, or what I'm calling a bonus example. In this case, we have a hybrid configuration. You have both on-premises hardware here at the top, and at the same time, the host application is connected through to the virtualization layer. And that provides interesting benefits to customers who are using cryptography as a service. During busy times, say Black Friday or holiday periods, you can have extra capacity available from the service provider. In the case of problems on your existing devices, you can bring more capacity into the service provider. And an interesting one also then is where you have an innovations team who may wish to use the same working keys as the main part of the organization, but won't have access to the Cloud HSM. It could be part of a low-risk strategy as you migrate from on-premises into the cloud. Oh yes, I have the second customer on that. Of course, second customer can do hybrid as well. So if we look at PCI compliance around this, PCI has been aware of Cloud HSMs and has them in the standards for quite a number of years now. The 3-year-old PCI HSM version 4 already has quite a number of items for Cloud HSM in there, and the PCI PIN frequently asked questions list also has some updates. On a service provider side, there is a significant amount of compliance required from the service provider. They're required to deploy the HSMs, the processing elements, in a secure manner under PCI PIN, PCI DSS, maybe even P2PE, if that's a service that they provide. The service provider is also required to have the same physical and logical security around those devices that you would expect if you were running them on your own. It's quite important to ensure that you have clarity with the service provider around the responsibility matrix. On one hand, it could be possible that the AOC from a service provider meets all or most of your PCI compliance around your HSMs, or at least around your cryptography. And that's an interesting position to look at. I also want to give a shout out to PCI HSM version 5. The RFC for RFC1 closed recently, and it was really interesting to see some of the advancements that the council are making in that area. There'll be a RFC2 in the spring, and I recommend you guys to go have a look at that, because it's going to be quite an interesting piece. So yeah, I said I'd come back to key management, and key management is an important part of the process. You know, knowledge and skills are in short supply. Sometimes we do these key management functions so very rarely that we forget what they are, and then we have to come back and remember them. My friends in the council, particularly Mr. Jemison, wherever he is, remind me that key separation is really important. And the council are quite strong on the fact that one user of a Cloud HSM service cannot access or use keys from another customer. They're also that if you make changes to the configuration for one customer or another, that they cannot affect each other. And these are things that we are very aware of, and we look after that in a multi-tenant environment. Also, an interesting thing to consider if you're looking at Cloud HSM is the ability to bring your own master keys. That's quite useful because then you reduce the level of testing and integration that you might need if you were going to do a master key change. I know for some of my old customers that master keys were a 4-letter word. Consider that you can use the same working keys both in on-premises and in the cloud. Quite a useful thing to do. Naturally, of course, if you're not accessing the HSMs directly in the cloud environment, the role of a secure cryptographic device or key loading device is very important. Key loading device connected to the Cloud HSM allows you to import and export keys easily, and I think that that's an important part of the whole life cycle of dealing with HSMs. And naturally, as we heard this morning, the forthcoming PCI key management operations specifications are really interesting, and I think you should participate in the RFC in a couple of weeks when that comes out. I wanted to go through a little bit more of a scenario. You remember I just had this picture up here a couple of moments ago, but it's only a small part of the overall ecosystem around Cloud HSMs. So I want to introduce our hardworking key manager. They're working very hard. There's a lot of things to think about. They have a key loading device for part of their day-to-day operations. And because they're remote from the Cloud HSM environment, they're using multi-factor authentication to authenticate their operations between themselves and the Cloud HSM service provider. Quite a useful thing to know. But as we all know, the key manager isn't working on his own. So I've introduced his key custodians, who are working with either digital shares, smart cards, or with the classic paper components. And together as a team, they're able to manage all of the key material between their organization, independent of any other customer of the service provider in this environment. And of course, what I'm not showing here then is a customer portal where the key manager or the customer admins are able to manage their configuration, and again, independent of the other customers. It's quite a nice way to look at managing this environment, especially if your application is already in the cloud. So yeah, if you were asking the question, what could it do for me, as some of the takeaways for today, I think the big one is the reduced scope, that you are sharing the responsibility for the HSMs, the HSM processing elements, between yourself and the service provider. You could consider the term delegated PCI compliance as the keyword around that. Obviously, with the cloud user, with the portals, with the user interfaces, you have improved workflows, improved efficiencies. Typically, the cloud service providers offer a very much more effective workflow when moving keys around or doing configurations. The user experience can be very, very good. Should you have some legacy compliance gaps, maybe you're still using variant master keys, or you're like our previous presenters looking to move to AES, then Cloud HSM can provide a solution that makes it possible to easily move and become compliant again. As we hear from many customers, there are cloud-first strategies in many organizations. And I think that the HSMs are often left as the unwanted guest at such a conversation. What are we going to do with them? Cloud HSM, from some of the various providers who are here in Barcelona, they would be happy to talk to you about how to do a migration into the cloud. My colleague who's in our security team reminds me that the operational security, the Cloud HSM service providers put a lot of time and effort into delivering a high-quality offering, and you can benefit from that. You don't need to go to the data centers to check on the HSMs. That's already taken care of. And naturally, as we just said with key management, the operation and workflow of doing key management tasks can be simplified. The use of the KLD or the portals offered by the service providers can make that much, much easier. I realize I'm running a little bit ahead of time. I'm still talking too quickly. Maybe we would just wrap up with a couple of observations that might be interesting for you. Cloud HSMs are delivered in a PCI compliant manner. That's quite important. The PCI is well aware of Cloud HSMs, and all of the service providers are contributing to the development of the updates to PCI HSM version 5 and the forthcoming KMO standard. I think you can easily integrate with the service provider. I think that the service providers deliver performance and scalability that meets your needs. Naturally, You can bring your own keys, and that makes some of the integration and the migration much, much easier. It's not starting from a blank page. From our experience with customers in the proof of concept phase, we can have customers up and running on the same day. That's quite interesting. Our production customers tell us that they're very pleased with the kind of service we're offering. They have reduced responsibilities. Their operational overheads are much lower. It's a really nice way to do things. So then I might encourage you to scan the QR code, which links you to our static product page, and download our white paper. It covers all of the offerings in the marketplace, including many of the service providers who are here. And yeah, I'll wrap up a little bit early and suggest that if you have any questions or any comments, myself and my colleagues are here all day today and also tomorrow. And we look forward to chatting to you about how cryptography as a service can meet your needs. Thank you very much for your attention.